Hey.
Hey.
Hi, everybody. We'll take a couple of minutes. We're still a little early, so we'll hang out, let people join for a bit.
All right.
Sounds good.
Go on outside. Come on. Come on, outside. Outside.
Hello, all. Hello.
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 Okay, you're all. Everybody's here.
Yeah, let's just give, since it's still a little bit early, let's give people another couple of minutes to join, and then we'll get started. A couple of minutes past 6:30.
Mute. You want to see? You want to start the video?
Yeah.
Start video so I can see you. There you go.
Hold on. Make sure that they can see me.
They can
And I
see
can talk.
you. They can see you. So that's one, two, these. You can see them. They can see you. You can see yourself.
Okay. Don't go too far. Mm-hmm.
So we'll just get started in 1 or 2 more minutes. Just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to dial in.
Hey, don't leave till the meeting starts.
And the meeting just you on your screen.
I think we can go ahead and get started in a minute. I think the way that we would want to do this, we have a short presentation planned. It might be useful if everybody could mute themselves for the duration of the presentation, and then we can unmute everybody and have Q&A for as long as we need to afterwards, for any and all questions that everybody will have. I want to thank you all, first of all, for making the time to engage in this dialogue with us. My name is Emmanuel Gillen. I'm with Iris Development. My business partners, Curtis Doucette and Wendy Hoffman, are on the phone as well. Together, we are Iris Development, a New Orleans-based housing development company. And we are partnering with the Housing Authority of New Orleans on a number of sites across the city in New Orleans, to produce mixed income housing, a mixture of both affordable and market rate housing. And so what we're here for today is to get the feedback on the designs that were made so far by our architects that are also on the line, Mawako Hattori and Jonathan Tate. I also want to introduce Hanno, who's available as well, and we'll be happy to chime in on the issues that pertain to them, obviously. Gian Jordan is here. She is the Development and Modernization Director, and we've also got Mario Washington and Emily May with the Housing Authority on the phone as well. If any of you want to introduce yourself personally, by all means, go right ahead.
And don't forget Leslie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Leslie. Hold on 1 second.
Hi. Hi. This is Betty DeMarco from Carrollton United.
Yes. Hi, Betty.
Just introducing myself.
Yep. And so Leslie Thomas is with Hanno as well. And sorry, I forgot to name you, Leslie. So yeah, this meeting is obviously open to the whole community. Carrollton Riverbend Neighborhood Association, Carrollton United, very important partners for us in this project. But we are also talking obviously about any interested parties, whether they're in the neighborhood or not, etc. So unless there's any questions at this point,
sorry. This is
I'd like
Bill Hyde from both CRNA and Community Commitment Education Center. I just found the unmute, so sorry.
Okay.
I'll go back on mute. I was just introducing myself.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Unless there's any other questions at this point, I think we can go into the presentation. We'll try not to spend too much time on it, so that
hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Reynard Thomas. I'm a board member of VOTE and a founding member of Versions of Experience, and also a board member of Reentry Alliance for Louisiana.
Great.
Just introducing myself.
Sure. Thank you very much. And you know, one thing.
And I'm Rob Seifert, a very concerned homeowner.
Right. And so one thing I will say is that whenever we take questions, I think it would be very helpful if everybody can just identify themselves, just so we know who's talking, what their association, if any, is. So we'll try to get through the presentation fairly quickly, but obviously we're happy to spend as much time as necessary on any specific subject. We would suggest using the, getting through the presentation first and then getting to Q&A, and we can obviously go back to any slides that we need to. So as I said, Aris Development consists of the three of us, Curtis, Wendy, myself. As you see here, happy to make our contact information available. Our mission, as you can see, is to create sustainable, attractive, and diverse rental and for sale housing communities. In this case, we're specifically talking about rental housing in the Riverbend area. And we'll get a little bit more into the details of this project specifically. And I'd like to turn it over to my partner, Curtis, for exactly that.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and thank you all again for having us. So I'm going to go through this presentation. I know that a lot of you have already seen it or quite familiar with this presentation, but I know that we also have some new people. So I just want to make sure that I cover everything for everyone, and we'll open it up to questions after we go through this presentation. We intend to spend the bulk of our time talking to you or listening to you rather than going through our presentation. So this project is the result of an RFP, a request for proposal from the Housing Authority of New Orleans. The authority has quite a bit of vacant land, and in 2017, 2018, I'm sorry, we were awarded an opportunity to create some rental opportunities as well as some home ownership opportunities. And this particular meeting today is more so about the home ownership. About the rental opportunities that are associated with the project. So we were awarded sites throughout Uptown. You see Malcolmine, Chapatoulas, but of course we're here to discuss the Riverbend because half of the sites are there in that neighborhood, in your neighborhood. So we can go to the next slide. Who's controlling the presentation? Okay. All right. And so the largest of the sites is.
Can I just quickly ask for people who are not Curtis to maybe mute themselves if they can, so that they don't send feedback back into the meeting. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah. Thanks. So so this is the larger of the sites. This is General Ogden, where the plan is 20 units, and the entirety of the project is intended to be within the scale of the neighborhood. We're not coming to bring in large multifamily developments, but rather duplexes that are of the size and scale that we typically see within the neighborhood there. And this is just a quick little overview of the neighborhood. And right here we have, this is the General Ogden site, and what was there previously owned and operated by Hano, and I think in operation until Hurricane Katrina, and then demolished. And here there were 24 units of public housing owned and managed once again by the Housing Authority of New Orleans. That's another angle of it, of what used to be there. And now this is a picture of the site at General Ogden. Again, I mean, we point out the previous development because there are some distinct differences between that and what we intend to bring to the neighborhood. Most importantly, it's lower in density than what was previously there, and also something that we think is more in keeping with the neighborhood in terms of the typology of homes. Once again, another angle of that. This is the subdivision of the lots. They'll be broken into 10 lots. Each of those lots will house duplex units. And this is basically the footprint of the buildings that will be there. The shorter ones, if you see, those are the 1-bedroom units. There'll be a couple of, so there'll be 4 1-bedroom units on this site. And then the remaining will be a mixture of 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. You'll see 3 bedrooms on the top floor, and on the bottom floor, you'll see 2-bedroom units. And this is just a rough layout of floor plans, what they'll look like inside the homes. But this is at the first floor level. because there are small differences between the first floor and second floor. So we make that distinction. Here's the first floor. And
maybe
yeah.
one thing to quickly note here is, you know, if people are watching this on different size screens, in view options at the top, you can actually zoom in. You know, we can zoom in as well, but then of course, you know, we're gonna be cutting off certain parts of the site. But within the view options at the top of your screen, you should be able to zoom in to whatever level you would like if you want to get to more detail.
Yeah, yeah. And just to give a slight bit of detail, I don't want to linger on any slide too long, but here in this ground floor floor plans, you see that there's, again, your 2-bedroom units with the bedrooms toward the back, living spaces toward the front. The 1-bedroom units are set up similarly, where there's the living space in the front, or the public space within the home, if you will, in the front, and then toward the back is the bedroom space. But then there's also what we'd like to highlight here is that we did make a good attempt. We have gone back to the drawing board after feedback from the neighbors. We already had porches and balconies in the original design, but we wanted to make sure that those porches and balconies were adjusted a little bit so that it could be the eyes on the street, a sense of community for our residents as well. And so here, what the architect really wants to highlight is the porches that we have, and in some cases the balconies that we have at each of the properties or each of the units. So as you see, that the 1-bedroom units have a full porch. They also have a full balcony up front, and then you have a porch that is front facing on the 2- and 3-bedroom units. We did make a little bit of a change to the design so that the porch is a little bit more front facing on the property. And this is the second floor plan. What's highlighted here in, I guess I'm terrible with the colors, but that looks like pink to me or something like that, where you see the balconies there, which are aligned similar to the porches as much as possible. And then this is the rendering of what it looks like now. There's been some adjustments we have heard the feedback from the community. There's a few things that we did. We pushed it a little bit back from the street. There's a little bit more of a setback than there was before. There's, again, I think the porches and the balconies are the biggest changes that you'll see. I'll also notice that there was some changes to the shapes and sizes of the windows. We tried to capture what we saw in the neighborhood here. And here's just another angle at it. If we could go back to that slide just for 1 second. One thing I'd like to point out as well is like the exterior of these homes are going to be hardy, similar to what you find with new construction pretty much throughout the neighborhood. All right. Yeah. And these are our smaller sites, Plum and Birch. And here on both of those sites, you'll find that there are basically 3 lots, or even if it's 1 lot, it'll be subdivided into 3 lots where we'll be doing 3 duplex units. So you'll get 6 units on each of those sites.
I have a question. Before we go on to the other sites, are we going to take questions on the general Ogden site at the end?
So what we had done, what we had planned is to just take questions all at the end.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, but absolutely, you'll have an opportunity, and if we need to go back to a particular slide as you ask your question, we're happy to do that.
Yes, okay, I'll hold off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and so this is, what is this? Is this Plum? Yeah, this is Plum Street before, with the structure that was there previously with Hano. This is the site now, and yeah, and same, that is Birch. All right, thanks. Okay, and these are just some of the examples that one of our architects provided to us to create some context from the neighborhood. These are the things that they studied to to inform their design. And so once again, this is the site plan that you'll see at Birch and at Plum. What's noted is that there's 3 duplexes there. Our goal is to provide parking behind the units. So we created a bit of a driveway in between 2 of the units and space for a couple of cars to fit in the back there. Typically zoning would require that when you're less than, you're 30 feet or less, you don't necessarily have to have off-street parking, but knowing that it's important to the neighbors and also knowing that it probably would be important to our prospective residents, we have added some parking in the back. And this is a basic rendering of what the sites will look like. We have a goal of programming some of the front yard space. We've talked about this before in other meetings that we'd like to do little book libraries and things of the sort, but anything that we can do to create a sense of community, we would like to.
And just to quickly add, and I'm sorry, it's probably obvious, but just to make sure, the colors here are just for a sense of shading and perspective in the drawing. They're not the actual colors that we would use. We're not going to be putting a blue roof on these buildings or anything like that.
Yeah. No, thanks for highlighting that, Emmanuel. The colors have yet to be selected. You'll find that the layouts, this is the interior layouts of these units, and you'll find that they're quite similar. And even though this is a different architect from the one who did General Ogden, you still find some similarities with your living public space, if you will, within the home up front, and then bedrooms toward the back. And the reason that I think you see those similarities is because the architects are dealing with similar constraints. Yeah. One thing I'd like to note as well is that, you know, there's a washer and dryer in every unit. That kind of stands out pretty much. 2 bedrooms, I mean, the 3-bedroom units have 2 baths, and so do the 2-bedroom units. Right. And then this is just to show some concepts as it relates to landscaping. We haven't fully decided what our landscape plan will be, but Iris Development has always used native plants. We've been talking to various organizations to help decrease the amount of concrete, to make sure that we're also focusing on water retention on site and things of the sort. Those details haven't been all worked out, but those are the types of things that we're considering as we plan landscaping. All right, and then this is the Cambronne site, which is a bit further down the line. We have not started architectural designs on this, but we have started to think through the subdivision process. This is Cambronne before, when it was under Hano ownership and management.
And it had 16 units. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, 16, no problem. 16 units there. And our current plan calls for 14. And this is also just an image of the site. We see some trees there on site that we're going to do our best to preserve. And so, and you hear, so right now, so this is how early we are in the process. As we bring it to you, we have not fully decided how we're going to program this site. There's a couple of different versions. This is option 1, where you see that some of the homes will be facing Cambronne, and then some of them will be facing Hickory.
And one thing to note here is, sorry if I can quickly interject, all of the lots over all 4 sites are usually 30 by 120. And the reason for that is that is sort of the standard lot size we see all over the neighborhood, you know, including immediate blocks and immediate neighbors around us. It's also a standard lot size with respect to all of the regulations that we're going to be subject to, the minimum size regulations that we'll be subject to for the purposes of building these duplexes. So it seemed like a very obvious and contextually informed choice to go with that. The orientation, of course, is a different matter, and that's what Curtis will get into with option 2 here.
Yeah. It's really simple. And in this version, then everything is toward Cambronne, facing Cambronne Street. And so there's going to be various different things that determine which one of those options we choose. Some of it is our considerations for parking, and that's probably going to be the biggest thing to determine it, and just also how it all feels on the space. And with that, I mean, that is pretty much it. As far as our presentation goes, we are happy to open the floor now for questions.
I have a Hi.
Hello.
This is
Hi.
Tina. I actually have just a couple of quick questions about the Cambron site, as it's my front yard now. Originally, something I had read on the Hano site in the specs, it was only going to be 12 units. You're now saying 14.
Yeah.
So they've now added 2 more.
So yeah, we have added two more units since the last time that we spoke about it. It just turned out, I think that we just realized that it could absorb another couple of units in terms of what's available there on that space.
Okay, and the original ones, because the buildings were here, even though they were vacant when I moved in, they did both, they altered. Some faced Hickory and some faced Cambron. Honestly, I think that's a much better look. Just for the input. And they did, at least already in the older buildings, they had like a driveway that went through the buildings that provided some parking in the back. Even though they were vacant, you could see that that's what it was back there. So I think the only thing I really have to say, you seem like you guys are looking to make things kind of fit in with the look of the neighborhood. And I'm concerned about that only because, like, in the past 2 years, the 3 houses that neighbor me that all went from singles, everybody is camelbacking everything. And I get it, but there's no sense of privacy anymore. And it's changing the landscape and the view of the neighborhood totally. And I also am kind of sad that some of these that they're building aren't for home ownership, because as a single income person, it was very hard to find anything affordable, whether it's rent or owning in this neighborhood. So it's kind of disappointing that it's not some for ownership and some for rental. Yeah.
So Tina, you say a lot that, number one, we agree with. The main thing is, I think that on that, the first thing at least, is that orientation. We haven't fully decided yet, but I think that everyone so far likes the idea of the orientation, where some of it is on Hickory and then some of it is on Cambron. So we agree with you there, and we also definitely intend to provide parking. We haven't shown that because we are still exploring it, and we didn't want to show you something that was subject to change. But we're glad for the feedback on that at this moment, because I mean we're very early on, so this is the best time to make.
Okay, and the only other thing I wanted to say is I think it was on one of the very first ones where they offered some of the smaller units were 1 bedrooms. I'm just going to say in this immediate neighborhood, it's almost impossible for a rental to find a 1 bedroom unit. So I'm just putting that out there. It's very uncommon to find one.
Yeah. And so we certainly will be making sure that we have 1 bedroom units on this site. The same as we did on the General Ogden site.
Okay.
You mentioned home ownership, and so the home ownership is coming. We're building 11 units, I believe it is, of home ownership in this neighborhood, and of those 11, 9 of them will be permanently affordable through the use of the Crescent City Community Land Trust. And their model is that they basically partner with the home buyer, and in so doing, they significantly reduce the cost of home ownership. So you're talking brand new homes that will cost us over $200,000 to build, that buyers will be able to buy probably below 180.
Right. Okay. I think that's great. I was just kind of hoping that there would have been at least 1 or 2 in what they built on Cambron that offered that as well. But that's great.
And not to bore you with the details of how these things are financed, but it's a lot easier for us to get a project financed when it's multifamily, when everything is contiguous. So that's what drives that decision. So the home ownership lots will be those ones that you find individually.
Okay.
And I just want to add on the home ownership, as well as on the designs of Cambron itself. We will plan to go back to the neighbors and to a public meeting setting once those drawings and plans
Start to
start to develop. That's right. That's right. So with respect to Cambronne, the only thing we're really sharing here is how we're thinking about the subdivision. It is not, we won't take any type of feedback as being dispositive of what we actually end up doing, because we will come back to the neighbors for those.
I think you should not use the word subdivision.
As
Only because I think it like gives people, like, I was nervous. That's why I got on today.
right. I mean, it's
well, is it technically the subdividing of the lots or a subdivision in
I think it starts to make people have visuals of something, I don't know, different than what's probably going to be there.
right?
So that was,
If I think I know what you mean, you're probably thinking that it's
like
more
tract
like
housing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and sorry, we're so in it that we don't stop to think about that. It's the technical term that the city of New Orleans uses for the actual process of creating lots.
Okay.
Is a subdivision, but point well taken. And
I guess just because the other ones didn't come off termed as subdivision for the other locations, I was like, wait, what do they mean by subdivision? What's coming, you know?
it's
So
the
that's
exact
it.
same thing. It's the exact same
All right,
thing with the
thanks.
others. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry for the
That's
confusion.
okay.
I have a few questions about the General Ogden
Yes,
site,
sir.
if you want to go back to those slides. First of all, I want to commend you and applaud your efforts to provide affordable housing to the neighborhood. This is a real need we have. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And also I like the fact that you're looking into the environmental impacts with water management and things like that. I have a few sort of detailed questions about the General Ogden site. I've seen it before. I like the fact that you've added the porches and the balconies in the front. My concern is the back, because I have three concerns. The first one is the back, you've got sort of a public green space where kids can play, but how do parents provide supervision? Are there going to be porches and balconies on the back?
There will not be.
Well, that offers several concerns, because what if a kid's playing in the backyard and the mother sees something that's concerned, and how does she get to the backyard? It's got to go around the front and around the back, and it's a long time to get down there. So it makes immediate supervision. It's also general supervision. The eyes on the neighborhood concept that encourage you to put balconies and porches on the front, I totally applaud. But this is a public space in the back, and there's no eyes on that one.
Yeah,
What would the extra cost be to put porches and balconies in the back?
So we don't have a specific figure for that, but I will tell you that even building these porches right now, because when a contractor bids something, they're going to bid it on the total space that they're building. But we can only rent based on livable space, and the fact that this is an affordable housing project, it means that rents are restricted. There's an amount of rent that we'll be able to that we'll collect on these homes, and it doesn't become any more because of an added feature like a porch, for instance, right? And it's not a matter of profitability. It's really more so a matter of feasibility. It becomes really challenging to make these projects pencil. We don't have, and we've said this in other meetings, we don't have tax credit dollars coming to this project. This is almost like a market finance deal with affordable housing compliance attached to it. So we had to figure out the best ways to stretch those dollars, and we had to make some decisions about what we thought might be most important in terms of what we can afford. And if I can be completely frank with you, our contractor hasn't run the numbers on these updated designs, and there's some things within it that are going to be more costly than what we had originally planned. And so I'm still at this point concerned. I think that we'll be able to work it out because we have great relationships with our contractors. but I'm already concerned about what we have and the feasibility of that. Adding additional porches and balconies on the back, I think it's next to impossible to get that funded.
Which actually I understand you're operating a lot of constraints and you're trying to bring something, a big benefit to the neighborhood. So I do appreciate that. My second concern though is on the second floor and even the first, how many exits are there in case of a fire?
So
and one of the reasons why, the second reason I asked the porches and balconies, and I've lived in a lot of neighborhoods that have, you know, triple deckers. The back porches provide a great space enhancement for the things, but they also provide a safety feature. That's how you get out of the house if there's a fire and the fire's in the front and you can't go down the front stairs.
Yeah, and that is something that we have mulled over quite a bit as well. So a couple of things, a couple of ways that we've looked at it, because that's a concern that we share. And one is that all of the windows are operable, and so there can be rescue from those windows if need be. There's also multiple ways to get outside of the home, even if it's not to get down to the ground floor. Like for instance, you can get to the balcony in the unit. And then also one of the biggest things that saves lives is you know, having people having alarm systems to notify people that there's a fire and that there's a problem. And of course, there'll be hardwired smoke detectors and all of those things to make sure that if something like that happens, people know about it as quickly as possible.
Well, I know in other places that I've lived in, this design would be illegal, and the fire department would not allow for its development. You know, if you've got an 85-year-old grandmother living with you on the second floor in the back, is she going to jump out the window?
Right.
I mean, I see these in general. This space here, there's a safety issue from fire. There's a safety issue in terms of supervision, and the last thing is people walking from the cars to their homes. You know, if they were going to a back porch and someone was sitting there, there'd be great observation. But now they've got to go down a narrow pathway between the houses in order to get to their front door. So there's a whole risk factor that would be mitigated by having back porches and balconies. You take care of, say, the security from parking to the residents. You would reduce, if they're carrying groceries, you would reduce the amount that they have to carry. You would provide a safety issue in case of a fire, and you would provide supervision. So that's really the major, I like everything else about the project, but this is to me, this is a serious concern.
And we get that. And so we've tried to mitigate those things as much as possible. Like one of the things, for instance, you mentioned the safety going from the car. There's a lot more space on the ground floor than I think people realize, because the architect was very intentional about making sure that there was wider pathways that's not creating some alleyway that is a hiding space, if you will, for someone. And then we also intend to accomplish safety or to achieve safety by making sure that the spots are well lit. So lighting is going to play a huge role in that. I mean, I can't fully argue with you about what you're suggesting might be absolutely the best, right? But we've tried our best to mitigate those concerns in other ways.
Well, to go back to the, you know, the 85-year-old grandmother in the back of the second unit, how do you mitigate that?
But so one thing about that is that, I mean, this is a second floor walk up. And so we're going to have, I believe, an ADA units available here. People with limited mobility are, in the first place, are already going to be much more likely to be on the ground floor. Oh, and that's the ADA unit that is marked there. And then, you know, additionally, I would just say there are two means of egress in the sense that there are the stairs and there's an outdoor area on the second floor. And in addition, all the windows are operable. We do think that you know, given it's conforming with code and also from our perspective as a property management company, we're not going to put somebody who has serious mobility issues on the second floor of an apartment. They're not going to want that in the first place. We think that given the financial constraints that Curtis has now mentioned, that's a fair compromise on that.
Okay, we can agree to disagree, but
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
And look, we want balconies as much as anybody. The reality is to get affordable housing units built, you have to operate in very tight guidelines, and that doesn't mean cutting any corners with respect to code or otherwise. You know, another thing you mentioned, for instance, the backyards. As you might be able to see, we've tried to create as much sight lines from the sides of the building where you enter and get out, where people might be most likely to actually have eyes to look out onto the back. I mean, even though they're diagonal, we've tried to create them as much as possible. We've oriented the paths that way as well, for exactly that reason. But it's very difficult to achieve all of this within the constraints that affordable housing construction poses on us. And so there are always choices and trade-offs that we have to make, and we think these are the optimal combination of them, given that we're still able to achieve outdoor space for everybody, which is also a point of rescue from the fire perspective, in addition to obviously the traditional entry and the operable windows.
Yeah.
I have one more question looking at this. At the end of well, you can't see where my finger's pointing, that's ridiculous. But anyway, on the green space where they meet the street, where there'll be a fence, or will it just be open to the sidewalk?
You mean where it says parking, for instance, or
no, where they I'm looking at, well, I can't. It's hard for me to tell you. I'm looking at the side view on the left side. There's a sign that says parking.
Yep.
And then there's a green space.
Yep.
Will there be a fence there?
So we haven't planned to put any fencing there at this point. We were thinking more along the lines of things that we can do that would be passive security, if you will, like whether it be what we plant. But we don't want to create like an atmosphere of gated, fenced in, that keeps everybody separated from the community in that way.
Yeah, I know. I'm sympathetic, certainly sympathetic to that issue. I'm just looking at the reality. That's going to be a walkthrough. There was one other thing I remember from that was
and not to cut you off, but what could prevent it from being a walkthrough is depending on what we plant, where we plant it, then we create those walking paths.
So you would create a green screen rather than an iron screen.
Most likely that would be how we would handle it.
If I may add something, please.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. The initial cost, if you were to have porches and possibly exits on the second floor in those buildings, could be a bit more, but ultimately it will create a more desirable property that you could rent or sell later on or whatever. That would be, you know, well, more desirable because it has access to the back. It has the community surveillance that Bill was talking about and all that. So initially it might cost a tad more to do that, but in the long run, it should pay off.
Right. Well, so in a market rate scenario, that is absolutely true what you're saying, right? And it's kind of difficult for us to demonstrate this without showing you our pro forma. So I'll use home ownership as an example. A few minutes ago, I was saying to someone that when we create a home ownership unit, at the very least, it costs us about $215,000. Now, if you want to if you want to sell that home to someone at 80% of the area median income, then that means you got to discount that about $50,000, right? And so where does that extra money come from? It's subsidy is the answer to that question, right? And so considering that this project right now, we're forging forward as though we might not receive any subsidy at all, it's going to be really challenging. Even if we get some subsidy, it's still going to be challenging. And so with that said, keep in mind, you said, well, we could charge more, and so then we could recoup the expense associated with it. This project doesn't work that way. A 2-bedroom rents for the same amount, whether it's 1,000 square feet or whether it's 1,500 square feet, whether it's got porches and balconies and 13-foot ceilings, or whether it's 8-foot ceilings and no porches and balconies, the rent is going to pretty much stay the same. And so technically, from a financial perspective, it would not justify the cost. And again, I want to make sure it's clear that that's not about profitability, that's about feasibility.
Can I bring up parking while we have this diagram up?
Sure.
Okay, and I'll try to be quick. I see 13 in the back. In talking with my wife and I, a key thing we think is parking. We've driven the neighborhood around it, and things are really tight around there. And of course, this is going to make it tighter. And it seems like if you move the 1-bedroom building, set them back, you can get 2 parking spaces driving in. That would mean a curb cut. That brings you to 17 parking places total. And then if you do a curb cut behind the 2 end units, then you can have 21 spaces. And I know at one point y'all came in with like 20 parking spaces or not. I think y'all did a couple months ago. But I want to offer that because I think parking is going to be a pretty big issue. Thank you.
I have a couple of thoughts on that, and I appreciate the comment. The first thing is that we are generally, just as a mathematical question, if you will, not crazy about curb cuts, because curb cuts take parking spaces on the street away, so the street front curbside parking spaces. So often, if we're creating a curb cut to create 2 tandem spots, we're really just creating 1 net spot, and that spot is then subject to the other car not blocking it within a household. The second thing I would say is I think we're hesitant to take that space in front away because we think it does provide an ability to have eyes on the street, to have some limited ability to be outside in front of the unit. There's these little areas where the cursor is right now that are actually quite useful, we think, for social interaction, for those types of things. And then on the third point, as far as the parking in the back goes, Curtis, remind me where we were with that, but we are not wedded to the exact configuration of anything. We understand parking is a concern. We thought at some point there was a concern around lighting. Is that right, Curtis?
Yeah, so there was a couple of things. So the neighborhood gave us feedback. The first thing that we presented was this. This is 13 parking spaces in terms of dedicated parking spaces to our building, right? And then the neighbors said, well, we think that there needs to be more parking. And we showed an option for more parking. And then there was a concern, particularly, I believe, from one neighbor, but I think a few people got behind it, that the lights from the parking would then shine into someone's bedroom or cause some kind of other inconvenience associated with that. And I remember distinctly that the neighbors said, well, we're not sure if we want that more parking or not. The thing is this, though. At the end of the day, we might not agree on how to achieve the parking, but we do agree that it is important that there is parking for the site. Emmanuel was going into the details about how much street parking there is. I think if you were to drive by that site right now, you'll find it relatively empty in terms of who's parking on the curb right now. And that's regardless of what time of day you drive by. So I think there's plenty of spots. I don't know if we've done an analysis to count exactly how many spots are around the property itself. But we certainly think that we can accommodate the parking to serve the additional residents that we're going to bring to the neighborhood.
Okay, and I'll try to be real quick. Emmanuel, thank you for pointing out where the 2 congregant areas.
Yeah.
But but those are relatively far from the two one-unit buildings that theoretically you could scoot back and have two side by side.
Oh, that's not allowed. We can't park in front of the, that's a matter of just the zoning regulations. We're not allowed to park in front of buildings that way.
Even though in the neighborhood there are other,
That's been
overall,
grandfathered
there've
in. And well, Jonathan, our architect, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not, I don't want to say anything that's wrong, but my understanding is that we wouldn't be able to put two spots in front of the building and then have the building pushed back a little bit. Jonathan, are you on the phone?
Yeah, I am, and I was going to just elaborate on that for just a second. Again, this is Jonathan Tate, the architect for this site. You're correct, Emmanuel, although it's a little bit more nuanced in two ways. One is we can't have the building itself pushed back more than the rest of the block face. So there's a requirement of the primary facade of the building has to be in alignment and within a certain proximity to the property line. And then secondly, you can only 1/3 of the lot frontage is allowed to be used for parking. So the most you could do is one parking spot. And as Emmanuel pointed out earlier, that one parking spot that you get in there would actually eliminate a street parking spot and also create a condition where people can't walk up and down the sidewalk because we've got a car, potential for cars to come through. So this notion of like kids running up and down the sidewalk gets compromised with kind of car traffic activity associated with that. So, in addition to trying to,
excuse me. And question on Bill.
Wait,
Yes, hi.
Okay.
There's been no thought to diagonal parking. I know it would probably create a one-way situation, but it seems like you can get more parking with a diagonal in the back of the property, and the lights in the bedroom. I don't see that happening on that scenario. So how does that play out?
This is John Trombley. If it's all right, can I share a screen? Is that possible?
Sure, I guess.
All right, I can't. It says I can't share the screen while another participant is sharing. Is it possible for me to show something?
Yeah, is it with respect to parking?
Yeah, what is it like you'd like to show?
It is, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it's with respect, it's an overview.
Okay, okay, give me 1 second. I think you should be able to now.
Okay, so this is just just an overview. I just put the plan on top of the lot. It shows Jeanette Street, and it also shows across the street. Bill, you had mentioned just now that you don't think there'd be lights shining in any bedrooms. I just want to point out that the one-way parking lot empties out directly in front of our house at 8915 Jeanette Street. You can see the front here. This is the front of our house, and the red line is the exit.
The apartment complex, not your particular house. I'm sorry, I was not thinking along those terms.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to confuse the two either. But yeah, when we're looking at the General Ogden site here, you're creating a thoroughfare between Willow and Jeanette Street. I would just say that Jeanette Street is it's a dead end, so there's low traffic, which is quite ideal for the houses that are right on the street. And the plan that you guys have now has the thoroughfare exiting directly in front of this house. And if you guys can imagine the lights blasting into this house, whether it be early in the morning or late at night, I think you can't avoid the fact that you're basically putting a street that dead ends directly in front of this house. Not only can you are the lights going to be an issue, but worst case, someone drinking might not slam on the brakes and go straight into the house. In one of the previous meetings, you said you'd think about how to block out the sunlight or the headlights that would be directed straight into that house. But I didn't see anything change in the plan you presented today. It's still the exit, and it's still a great concern for the quality of life inside that house. It's only a 2-bedroom, 900 square foot house.
Right.
And just
yeah, and we haven't really done very much, as you can see, since we last presented this. I don't think this is substantially all that different from what we've presented last time. And I'm certainly receptive to what you're saying with respect to lights coming into the house. And I think we need to take a look at what some mitigating things could be to do that. And I think materiality has a lot to do with that. personally. I mean,
What do you mean materiality? What do you mean by that?
So for instance, you know, maybe we can look at, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I'm just thinking out loud. But to the extent that maybe we could have a gate or something like that for the parking area so that lights don't go beyond. That's something that we could look at. But I don't know that that's, I don't want to speak out of turn. What I'm saying is more, we are happy to spend some time thinking about that in terms of how we can make sure that lights don't affect neighbors the same way that they might.
Yeah.
We could also circulate the other way, right? There's nothing I think was particular about going one way or another. So if we just turned and went away from your street, then it wouldn't be any direct lights going in at that point.
And I don't think we have other, we're not facing, the cars going in the opposite direction wouldn't be facing any other homes, right? Is that correct? Not directly.
There's a home directly across from the site on Willow.
But but it's perpendicular, isn't it?
Regardless, it's bedroom windows, and you know, what we're talking about is emptying out the traffic into a dead-end street that's low traffic right now. And
yeah, I mean, look, there's certainly going to be some impact. You know, I mean, certainly when you go from having like no housing at all to some housing, there are some things that are definitely going to change, and I think that some degree of change is unavoidable. And we'll try to mitigate the things that are major inconveniences for people.
That would be a major inconvenience. Headlights in a bedroom of children at all times during the day and night. I would consider that a huge change in quality of life, and it's unavoidable if you're going to put a street behind these houses.
Well, look, I mean, it's certainly our, as Curtis has said, it's our commitment to want to provide parking off street for the neighborhood. Our general take on this is that is what the neighborhood would like to happen here. Those off-street parking spots have to get on and off the site somewhere or another. As Jonathan has explained, parking in front of the sites does not actually not yield any net spaces. So it puts us at a conundrum other than parking in the back as to how we can provide off-street parking, to be completely honest.
I would just say if there was a way to not have an exit there, that would solve the problem with some trees. You know, if it was a one way in, one way out scenario.
Mm-hmm. So, but a one way in, one way out would still mean lights coming out somewhere, right?
Yeah, unless you plant, you know, it's just.
Oh yeah. Okay, well, and that's absolutely a fair point. And you know, landscaping is absolutely something that we think is very important. Not only as a mitigating factor for these types of issues, but in general. So let us take a look at that, and we'll be happy to try to explore however much we can minimize that. Curtis, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
Well, no, I just wonder. I heard that suggestion from you, John, about planting, and I just want to make sure that I understand you, because if planting is a solution, that sounds like a relatively easy one, right? But so you're suggesting plants where? Because obviously, if someone's coming out of the driveway, we can't put plants there, and that's the direction of the headlights, right?
All I'm suggesting is to not put the exit of the parking lot directly in front of our house.
Your house.
That's directly across the street. So rather than there be an exit there, there'd be green space and trees.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's talk to Jonathan. Maybe there's a way when you come out of the street, right? That's angled in a way, but we'll have to discuss this.
I would suggest let us take a look at it.
Yeah.
We hear you. I want to get to a couple of other questions. There's one that actually was also texted to me, but not trying to dismiss the concern. We'll absolutely take a closer look at that, especially with the diagram that you sent. That's very helpful.
Before you go on to the next thing, I just wanted to add 2 points. and maybe I'm completely out of turn on this, but what if you provided, I don't know what Jonathan's house looks like, but what if you put the green screen in his front yard? And maybe that's something he doesn't want. But, we have streetlights that go into our bedroom when we put something in front of those lights to mitigate that. And I don't know whether that solution would be acceptable to Jonathan, but that might be something to think about, so that there's a green screen so the lights don't go into his bedroom. Now, he may not want to have plantings in the front of his house. I don't know.
Right. Well, yeah, thanks for
But I
the
would
suggestion.
think if that's the case, that that Irish Development would pay for those green screens.
I mean, let us take a look at what we can do, and we'll go from there.
And I do want to encourage you, I'll say one more thing. I just want to encourage you to see where you can cut back in expenses in other places, because not having those porches and balconies on the back of the house is a major flaw. And there are many cities where that would be illegal.
We hear you loud and clear. We have already, I can assure you, done a tremendous amount of work to get the balconies in there as is. Again, this is not a tax credit project. This is not a subsidized project. We're aware of it, and I appreciate the concern, and we certainly would like to, and we'll do our best to try to continue evolving design in a way that achieves all of the goals which we certainly share.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan Lott asked a question by chat that I want to get to. If these are rentals, why are you subdividing them into smaller lots instead of consolidating into one? Will ownership of the land remain with Hano? So on the latter question, I can answer. The ownership long-term of the land will remain Hano's. The improvements will be owned by Iris Development, and we will lease the land from Hano for a duration of 99 years. So certainly if you look up the property records, the ownership remains with Hano. In practice, or de facto, we would own and operate this property. And if I'm expressing this too strongly for Hano's taste, please do correct me. But I think that's a fair representation of that. With respect to the first question, I believe that's a technical issue with respect to having multiple buildings in a single zoning lot. But I would like to ask Jonathan to explain that so as to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting.
No, that's correct, and the configuration is representative of what the zoning calls for in this particular neighborhood, and a requirement for the individual lot per house, basically.
Hi, this is Nicole Bowie. I have a question, and maybe you answered it and I didn't understand it. So you have 10 units. Is there any way? Well, first, all lots are 120, correct? 30 by 120.
Correct.
What is the actual size of the 2 or 3 bedroom? What is the size of those buildings?
Yeah, so a 2-bedroom is in the neighborhood of about 950 square feet, and a 3-bedroom is somewhere around 1150, 1200.
Well, what I mean is it a 30 by 72 or 30 by 60? What do you know that?
Oh, it's less than that because there's some side yards too. Jonathan, do you know offhand what the dimensions are?
It's more like 24 by 55 or 60 is for these deeper units.
Okay, so with that being the case, so you were saying earlier that there's no allowance for these properties to be pushed back. Is that the case? So is there no way all 10 properties back 10 feet, 15 feet?
Yeah, that's correct. It has to do, and it's a little difficult to describe honestly because it's a series of sort of evaluation questions you have to go through with the setback requirements for front yards, which is all on the CZO, and they do require that all the properties are as close to the street frontage as we can get, and in fact they're not even allowed to be set back. The most you can set them back is 20 feet, but they can't deviate more than it's a historic pattern. It has to be within 3 feet of that historic pattern. And so historically, these were all street-facing properties, and they have to align with that. But it's also consistent with the pattern around the neighborhood. So that's the way the city planning actually enforces that. So.
Okay, because I know we have new construction on Eagle and I believe, what is it, Willow Street or Plum, and there were some properties that were set back, but they were single family homes. And I was just wondering, could that happen? And then if you could push them back and then have parking in the front, you possibly then could have those individual yards, which would delete that back street that John is talking about, because everybody in their particular unit would have a yard to themselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, it actually wouldn't create any off-street or any additional parking because we'd be limited to 1 parking spot, or at best 2 tandem spots behind each other because we can only take 1/3 of the facade away for parking. So when you then subtract the curb cut, we're really talking about only creating 10 additional tandem spots. And then, yeah, we didn't think that would be the best use of the, the floor plan that we have. But regardless, unfortunately, we can't push back that far in the first place. But I appreciate the creative thinking on parking for sure.
Yeah, Nicole, I often refer to our work as figuring out a Rubik's Cube, right? And that's kind of what you see right there. I mean, on one side, you have a constraint associated with zoning. On another side, you have a constraint associated with finance. On another side, you have a constraint, associated with what the market wants and all of those types of things. So, we go back to the drawing board a lot and we think about a lot of things, and some of the ideas that you present, we bring to our architect as well. And then we find out, why we can't do them. But we have certainly tried to explore every way for the parking and many of these issues that have come up.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I've got thank you, Nicole. I've got a few additional questions via chat from Rob. Why did the Plum Street lot go from 2 market value homes to 6 multifamily units? We had to reshuffle for financing reasons more than anything exactly which properties go where, because of the financing of affordable properties requires a certain minimum amount to be able to be viable and included in certain programs that are backed by federal housing agencies like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. I don't want to bore you with the details, but it's simply put, to be able to finance the project, we had to create clusters of at least 6 units, and we were able to do that here with the width that we had. And so there was a little bit of rethinking about that. There's another question from Zig4381 asking, concerning the Plum Street property, how much off-street parking will be provided? With Oak Street nearby, parking becomes an issue on a regular basis. Also, there will be will there be a property management company responsible for upkeep, etc.? Do you want me to address that, Curtis, or do you want to take a turn?
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, starting with the parking, although you should be the parking guru, but starting with the parking, we have 4 spots there dedicated for 6 units, so it's not exactly 1 for 1, but we do feel like we have pretty good parking, especially when you consider the parking options that are available in front of the home as well. As for the property management company, the way that I really like to answer that question is that we're not trying to skirt that responsibility. The buck stops with us. And we are likely to have a third-party management company, but we've also managed properties on our own. We feel pretty good about our track record of maintenance and maintaining safety and good quality standards. So whether we do it ourselves or whether there's a third party doing it, we're going to hold them to our standard.
Hello, parking. Jamie. Can I do parking? Quick question. I'll just follow up while you have.
Yeah, sure.
The parking you have there, the way cars or however they're situated, can you do that kind of situation on the back of General Ogden maybe at either end. It cuts a little bit from the green space where the kids could play, but it would be on the edges. And you do have that driveway that, of course, Mr. Trombley doesn't like because of the lights, but maybe that is a possibility if y'all.
Well, you know, the thing about that orientation is that then we shift John's problem to someone else. So, because the cars have to come in and out of somewhere. So I think like whatever solution we apply, we have to apply a solution that works, knowing that those cars are ultimately going to be coming out facing someone's home.
Curtis,
Okay.
if I could just ask, I'm
I think
sorry.
it's super important that at least one parking place per unit at odds, and even really all of them, because these are generally dense areas. I don't mean to be the only one talking about this. I'm sure other people will speak up if they feel the same way. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say one last thing about it is that you've put in this parking alley in the back of the General Ogden lot. But if you took away that parking alley and used that money for things like back doors and landscaping, then how many spots are you left with around the site? You have about 20 plus parking spots all the way around the site. And you have all those funds left over for added benefits for the residents that are living there. So is that something that you consider, is just scrapping the idea of the thoroughfare and putting that money towards things that are going to benefit the residents of the units, like back doors?
A couple of things there, John. So one is parking is probably not the most expensive thing that we're going to build on the site. And so I don't know how much that additional savings associated with parking is going to translate to additional amenities. But I think also what I hear you suggesting then is that there is no dedicated parking for these homes, and that seems to be in direct contradiction to what other people might want on this call, because it sounds like generally people tend to lean more toward more parking rather than less parking, and certainly no dedicated parking on the site.
Well, how many people are living around it?
Right,
and how many of those people live around it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we didn't take addresses necessarily, but we assume that everyone here is a community member and lives relatively close by.
Sorry, there's quite a few questions, so I want to start getting to them. Yeah, I mean, there's some talk about parking. Zane says, I'm not convinced we have heard the last word on this. We need to keep discussing many issues. Parking and porches, balconies are two such issues. We're not trying to get away from that conversation by any means. I think, you know, we're certainly willing to work with everybody on the parking. You know, these lots formally don't require any parking at all. To John's point, we heard the neighborhood loud and clear that you would want parking units off street for the most part, is what I've understood. If I'm wrong on that, please do correct me. But you know, we are certainly committed to minimizing the effect in terms of parking that this development will bring. I do also want to bring out, just with respect to sheer density, going from 24 to 20 units, as far as what is actually built here, should conceptually also help with that in that respect. Zane, I mean, I want to open it up to you, because I certainly, you know, again, we're not trying to shut down conversation on anything, so by all means, go ahead. Zane, are you still there? I don't hear from him. I don't know if he is still on the line. But anybody else who has questions on that, we can get to it. I'd like to try to get caught up on some of these questions. From Betty, I believe, the question from Rob makes me wonder what addresses will be rental and what is home ownership. Everything that we are doing in the Riverbend that is rental is presented in this presentation. So it is Plum, Birch, Cambronne, and General Ogden. Any other addresses that you may have incidentally heard of before, that we will come back for, obviously, would become home ownership sites. So we don't have another set of rental homes to come back with, other than these. Rob says we have a parking issue and we know that the single shared driveway will not be sufficient. Rob, just to make sure that I interpret that correctly, you're saying that you think that there should be additional off-street parking beyond what we're currently providing, or and if I'm misinterpreting, please correct me.
I think that with your Plum Street property, that someone's just going to park in that center driveway and not letting anyone park back there. There's going to have y'all going to have 6 separate families on a lot that was originally designated for 2 houses with one shared little driveway. And you just know that that's not going to happen. We have a major parking issue here. I live on the corner of Eagle and Plum. Cowbell, when they're doing lunch, it's crazy. It's always crazy. I had to put up railroad ties to stop people from parking in my yard. And this little short block with y'all putting 6 units there is going to cause a major issue.
Right, and to be clear, we will not tolerate anybody blocking access to parking by parking in that driveway. We'll make, yeah. And
how are you going to manage that? How are you going to manage that?
I mean, we can certainly establish a relationship with a towing company. And we this has been something we've done more so with multifamily, but for illegal parking, we've had people towed, and I think that's something that could probably be handled relatively easy, where they can call, residents could call if someone's illegally parked to have them towed.
Right. Yeah, a question I'd asked much earlier about the diagonal parking behind Hodgson Street. Nobody ever came up with an answer to that, a yes or a no, or a why not, or whatever. Is that thoroughfare already one way, right? As far as I can see.
Mm-hmm. I believe it is. I don't know if I've thought about that particularly. Jonathan, you want to weigh in on that, and even on the angled parking?
Yes, so you got to pick up a few more parking spots if you do angle parking. Even if it's one way, then it's one way. So that doesn't change whether it's one way or two way. So if you're already designated at a one way, and then whatever person is put out with the lights, maybe there's something could be done about that tastefully. Going back to the parking, like Rob says, there's no parking. Once we get back into full swing, this neighborhood, and it doesn't just have to be Cowbell, it doesn't just have to be Poor Boy Festival, it doesn't, it's always every Friday, Saturday night, so, and we're going to congest it a whole lot more with this activity going on here. So parking is a bad issue in my mind. So that's my input.
Yep. Nope. I appreciate the input, and I would just add we are providing the off-street parking that the zoning district doesn't necessarily require, and we're certainly committed to minimizing the impact that we have with respect to.
So the diagonal parking, I still haven't got a feedback on that.
Well, so I don't want to. I'm not trying to ignore it as much as I can't speak to it from an architectural point of view. I'm certainly open to exploring it. I don't have any categorical opposition to it whatsoever. And I'd be happy to get with Jonathan. And Jonathan, if you have any thoughts on it right off the bat, by all means. But I also don't want to put you on the spot. But by all means, we're open to it.
Yeah, I mean, we can lay it out that way, sure. Like, there's no harm in giving that a shot. And we may have the depth for a proper drive lane to do that in that case, in the rear yard. And you may gain a few extra spots as a consequence of that as well.
The next question was the size of the bedrooms in these units. That's again putting you on the spot, Jonathan, and maybe Mwako, if you could chime in on those for Plum and Birch as well.
Yeah, no, I'll just say, generally speaking, there's no bedroom that is smaller than 10 by 12, and a number of the bedrooms are more like 12 by 12. The larger bedroom being more like 12 by 12. And that's generally the dimensions across all our units.
Yep.
And I have a similar dimension as well.
Okay, thank you, Mwako. I see a message from Betty, with respect to Cambronne, the lot sizes for the 7 duplexes, they're all 30 by 120. Again, sort of the standard lot size, if you will, with one of them being slightly larger, 31, I want to say, by 120 for Cambronne. Rob voices concern about lowering the property value of all the homes in the area. I think we can speak to that pretty straightforwardly. There's no particular evidence that development activity or even mixed income development activity would do that. I think your property value would be lowered perhaps if we do a particularly bad job or spectacularly bad job of actually managing the property. We don't have a track record of that in all modesty. I don't know otherwise how to address that question other than that to say that, you know, this is a publicly owned property that is used for the public good, and in this case that means affordable housing. I don't think that needs to be tied to affect some property on private property values. I don't know, Curtis, if you want to add anything to that.
No. I agree.
Yep. Betty is requesting how do we access the recording of the meeting after the meeting? This meeting, I want to ask for Leslie for input on that. There will be a recording of this meeting. I don't know if it will be made available or how. Leslie, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm just doing 12 things at one time, but I'm still here. Yes, we will post the recordings once you guys submit that to us to the Hano. We will post them on the Hano website in the communities tab. And if you hover over the communities tab, you'll see a link that says Upper Scatter Sites Development. That is actually the link on our website that will include all community engagement presentations and invitations or any other information that is submitted by Iris Development will be located in that section on our website. Probably.
Hello.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm Jeannie, and my property at the corner of Plum and Eagle, my neighbor just asked most of the questions that I wanted to ask. So it's a given now that this lot is not going to be for home ownership. It will be for rental. Will you screen these tenants, or will they be Section 8 or anything of that nature?
Mm-hmm. So yes, the tenants will be Section 8 tenants. This is Hano-owned land.
So that will lower the property value.
No, ma'am. I think that's I want to push back on that because we're making an assumption that if we rent to people who have Section 8 vouchers, that they're going to tear up the neighborhood. I have a long track record of renting to people with Section 8 vouchers that are model tenants, model residents.
And I wasn't saying that. I don't begrudge anyone having a nice home,
So,
but I've seen it also through Section 8.
Yes, ma'am. And I understand the concern. And this is something that we should probably address every time that we get on, because I know that, you know, affordable housing has a stigma and sometimes very well deserved, right? And there's also been some challenges in this neighborhood associated with the properties on these particular sites. But I want to tell you that, you know, you're not the only one who's concerned about your property value. We are too. We go into this fully as your neighbor, and we have quite a bit of property to be concerned about what it's worth as well. And a big part of keeping the value up is to make sure that we have a place that's well maintained, and also to make sure that we have a place that is, for lack of a better way of putting it, drama free. And that's something that we intend to make sure happens. I mean, look, we do screen our tenants. We don't discriminate against people, but we certainly screen our tenants and make sure that they meet the qualifications. And then there's also a process of making sure that people are living up to their side of the bargain, living up to their agreement. If you're going to stay here, there's a certain way that we're expecting you to live, the same way that they have expectations of us, right? And so all of those things. And when I tell you that the buck stops with us, whether we manage the place or not, we can be quite overbearing. Our property management company that works for us will probably tell you that we're quite overbearing because we have managed it ourselves. We know what it looks like when it's done well. And so we have that expectation. And I don't mean to continue to go on, but I think that this is an important point, because I know a lot of people have this concern. And it's the thing that concerns me the least. I think that when this thing is built and developed and you see me 5 years later, you'll say, y'all, you guys did a good job. You know, it did not take away from our neighborhood in ways that we feared it would.
Okay. Time will tell. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, it will. You're right.
Thank you. From Rob, 2 questions. Did you take into consideration the new construction homes on Eagle, and will you carry the same tax burden the homeowners in the neighborhood do? So with respect to the tax burden, Hano, as a public entity, just like any nonprofit or public agency, is exempt from property taxes. The improvements on these lots will be subject to property taxes, and so we will be subject to property taxes. There are specific programs available specific to affordable housing to lower that burden, for instance, through the Industrial Development Board. We have not as of yet applied for any of them, but we are certainly exploring that, and we would look at it. But there wouldn't be any scenario in which we're not paying property taxes, or would be fully exempt the way that a nonprofit organization might be. And then with respect to the question on Eagle, take into consideration the new construction homes on Eagle. I'd like to ask with respect to aesthetics or design, or if you could clarify that a little bit, that'd be helpful. Rob, are you still there? If you are speaking, you might be on mute. Okay.
What were the questions you needed to know about the
The question was, did you take into consideration the new construction homes on Eagle?
Oh.
I was talking more about property value and aesthetics.
Okay. So, I mean, as far as property value goes, we are not trying to build homes that we can sell for the highest amount. Certainly not with respect to these rental homes. So what we are trying to optimize for is both contextual design, contextual program, and the livability, the quality of life for the residents. So that's sort of been the main things that we've looked at. I have, let's see, what's the next question? I live within a block of the General Ogden site, and parking is a huge concern for me. Nobody on my block has a driveway. We would all lose street parking. You know, as I've said before, we hear you. We are trying to provide off-street parking far beyond what the code would require us to do, you know, the only thing that I would add is we absolutely hear you, but obviously Hano has been a neighbor of y'all's for a long time as well. I can't. It's likely that there will be some street parking associated with the development projects in question, but we're trying to minimize that exactly again by providing off-street parking. There's another question. Can you give us some examples of other sites you have worked on that were similar to these units? I'm looking at your website and don't see anything that are 2-story duplexes. We've worked on a number of different types of projects, both in renovation and new construction. As far as new construction goes, a couple of things that come to mind. We've done a few homes both in New Orleans East and in Gentilly that are single-family homes that are sort of in the 12 to 1,300 square feet range. We've also built a triplex on Carrollton Avenue, but on the other side of I-10, so in Mid-City. This this is sort of very much a similar scale to those projects. Juliana is asking, would you explain again how the project is funded? So the project is funded essentially through the same way any traditional real estate development project is funded, which is a combination. The biggest single chunk of funding is a construction mortgage that we would get from a commercial bank, and that's going to be somewhere between 60 and 80%, I would imagine, or possibly even a little bit higher in this case, of the development budget, and that's something that we would have to, through the cash flows that come in, even though they are restricted, pay off over time. And then there would be some amount of private investment in the form of equity that we would need to raise to be able to complete the project. And as much as we can avoid doing that, it would be great, obviously, because that money is expensive. That's not our money. We need to pay it back, and we need to pay it back with some level of return. Curtis, I don't know if you want to add to the financing stack.
Yeah, I mean, then there's still some things that are in question, whether or not we'll get them, right? We applied with the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas, which we've successfully gotten a grant there before. And there's been some other grant sources that are just yet to be determined, and so far not looking good necessarily. So this is mostly going to mirror a market rate type deal. Someone did mention taxes before, and so one of the options that's available also is to cut some expenses on the operating side. There are a reduction in taxes associated with developing and operating affordable housing. So we'll be applying for those things through FANO, the Finance Authority of New Orleans, as well. No problem.
Thank you. And I think that brings us up to date on the chat questions. I certainly don't want to only do that. I see that, for instance, the phone number 504-432-8437 raised their hands to want to speak. And let me go right ahead, sir or ma'am. Can you, hello? Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
May have to repeat the number.
504-432-8437. Okay, well, by all means, speak up if at some point in the you wanna ask a question. Can you share other neighborhoods where you haven't lowered the property value where you have developed in? Because I read a HUD report that states that adding Section 8 housing will. You know, I can't really speak to any development project we've ever done where we have lowered property values. It's our primary goal to look at the housing that we provide and make sure that it is affordable. Certainly our goal for our property is not to become unaffordable, because that's our whole mission. And we think housing is an essential good or service. And I think as a matter of policy, also from Hano's perspective, that is something that you try to lower the price of with respect to your own housing stock. I don't know how to prove that to you, other than, you know, I certainly welcome you to take a look at all the properties that we've developed and look at the neighborhoods around them and see what the evolution of the housing prices have been. I'm not familiar with the report that you're referring to, but I'd be happy to take a look if you can send it to me. In general, I'm fairly familiar with the in general, I'm pretty familiar with the academic literature on the subject, and I think the evidence for that happening in the face of new development is fairly low, to the extent that it exists at all. But I'm happy to take a look at the report if you'd like to share it. Betty said, is asking, will you receive any city funding? As of right now, it doesn't seem that way. We would certainly be open to it if the city were. We have found that as of late, a lot of the little funding that exists with respect to financing affordable housing has been diverted for COVID relief. And that is not something that I'm saying with any type of grudge. We're obviously in the middle of a pandemic. As of right now, the answer is no. It's not a part of our calculations. It's not a part of our planning to go forward, but we certainly are open to it and would like to be able to get the city to participate in the project. there seems to be new funds available for affordable housing with the CARES Act. Will you be applying for that or any money from the Louisiana Housing Corp? I am not aware of any funding that is specific to this type of development that's available through the CARES Act. The CARES Act, in part, I believe, created the ability to request forbearances for federally funded projects, meaning any project that has a federally backed mortgage, such as HUD, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, et cetera. Not to get too technical about it, but we have not seen any type of product within the CARES Act that applies to our situation.
Yeah,
And
Emmanuel, if I could jump in on that though.
Sure, go ahead.
There is some funding that has come into the city, and it's associated more so with housing people right away. So it's not associated with development projects. It's things like getting homeless people off the streets, or rental assistance for people who might be struggling paying their rents in the existing units. And in fact, some of the funding, part of the reason that we ended up on the waiting list with the city funds is because some of the funding got, well, that's not entirely true, but some of the funding did get redirected toward those efforts. And so it jeopardized some people who were actually awarded city funds for a moment.
We are not applying for any funding from the Louisiana Housing Corp. The only thing that would apply in this case would be tax credits. This type of scale doesn't lend itself easily to being financed with tax credits, because tax credit projects come with a bunch of fees. And there's no other funding programs that are easily usable with LHC. Unfortunately, LHC also has a strong preference for parishes that are not Orleans with a lot of its funding programs. And that means it puts us at a disadvantage to try to apply for those oftentimes anyways. The next question, I think, is what is the projected start completion date of the General Ogden site? We are still a ways out. We are probably looking at sometime in the fall at the earliest. I would say ideally before the end of this year is what we really are shooting for, is to try to get started. But we want to respect all the processes that we need to go through. We want to respect the process both of neighborhood engagement, both of city planning, of all the I's that need to be dotted, T's need to be crossed, etc. And I would say a similar answer to Plum Street. It might be a little bit sooner, but it would be sometime in the fall at the earliest. We certainly will be happy to continue communicating if we are getting closer to that, but we're not close enough to give any type of definitive date with respect to breaking ground or getting permitted or any of those types of things. We still have quite a process to go through. What is the process of approval? I mean, there's a number of things that apply here, and with projects like these, and the primary one that I would talk about is safety and permits, and just getting a building permit. And then there's a number of administrative processes through HANO that we need to go through, because HANO is indirectly, and Leslie, tell me if I'm saying it wrong, but they're indirectly a part of Housing and Urban Development, which is a federal agency. So there's a number of review and other processes that we need to go through to be able to close on construction and move forward. There's another question also with respect to Cambronne, when we would expect to start. Obviously, Cambronne is a little bit behind. We still have to start our design process. We appreciate your input and certainly welcome other input on the orientation of those sites. And we would probably start working on the design of that, and subsequently would come back and present those designs in public meeting as well. And at that point, hopefully we'll have a clear sense of when that would be. But it's not our intention to sit on it for a long time with respect to Cambronne. Okay, I want to open the floor for other people who are on the phone or video who haven't had a chance to speak up or who've had questions.
I just
Any?
want to say.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I want to say that I really appreciate you all taking the time to listen and just kind of, approaching the process in this way. Obviously, change is not easy for anybody. But I think that I get a good feeling about you guys that you're going to try to do your very best to make this the best development and make everybody happy. And I do get a feeling just from the way that you've approached these meetings. So I just hope that that continues through the process. And I'm just, again, thankful that, that y'all are going about this way.
Very much appreciate that comment, Matt. It's essential for us to want to be a long-term neighbor in this neighborhood or any neighborhood that we work in, that we establish a relationship on the right foot. I'm not saying that we will always get it right, but it's certainly our intention, and so it's very much appreciated that's recognized. So thank you for that.
All right. Sounds like we've, I think we must have covered everything that people want to hear.
Yeah, so we've taken notes. We've got some additional homework to do as we return to trying to work on the drawings here. Feedback well taken. We certainly understand the sensitivity to parking, to light, and certainly are also open to questions that only come up as soon as you click leave meeting, because that's how that tends to happen. So by all means, feel free to be in touch. We're always happy to receive feedback, and I believe so is Hanno. And we'll be in touch shortly. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, guys. It's Betty.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Betty. Appreciate it.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Juliana, be well.
Thank you.
Thank
You as well. Bye-bye.